decisions. There are so many great cameras to choose from. We got the Canon R5, we got the R6, we got the C70, and we also got Sony's A7S3, all coming out this year. But then there's also the Panasonic S1H, which everybody seems to have forgotten about, and I think it's a really nice camera. So today we're going to take a closer look at the Panasonic S1H from a hybrid photographer's perspective. So let's check it out. So I've been on a bit of hiatus from YouTube lately, and I'm really sorry for that. I wish I had more time doing my YouTube videos because I really enjoyed it. I so much enjoy connecting with other filmmakers out there and other creatives. It has brought me a lot of joy over the past year that I've done my YouTube videos. But I've been away for good reason, and that is because I've been extremely busy getting a lot of experience for shooting a lot of different kinds of projects. My friends and I did our first short where we shot on the Arri Alexa Mini, and we had Cooke anamorphic primes. It was really fun and a bit difficult shooting on anamorphic lenses. That was really cool. I also did my first short documentary, also with the same crew that we shot on the Sony Venice. That was a really interesting camera, and I've also done a few projects where we shot on the Pocket 6K, and of course I brought the Panasonic S1H. So let's just say that I have a few thoughts when it comes to camera and camera choice. So I find myself more often than not being hired as a hybrid photographer. So I will be doing maybe stills in the morning, then doing an interview with the CEO or a marketing executive or another important person within the company. And then on the second day, we might be shooting brand videos, both landscape and horizontal, for social and other online platforms. And here, neither the Alexa or the Venice will do that job because they're both film cameras. Neither will actually the Sony A7S. So let me elaborate on that for a bit. Now, the A7S3 really is a spectacular achievement on Sony's part. It looks to be such a great video camera, and for most work delivering to social media, you should be fine with 12 megapixel on the still side as well. But for me, as a stills photographer delivering to both online and print, I know from experience of working almost a decade in an in-house environment for one of Sweden's biggest retail brands that my art worker colleagues will want me to shoot with a lot of air around the subject, more than I might like to. And now you might be saying, well Daniel, then surely the R5 is a camera for you. It's got that 48 megapixel sensor, that 8K RAW video, and that dual pixel autofocus. And you may very well be right, but there's one thing that is very important to me as a professional, and that is reliability. I can't have a camera suddenly overheating or running out of recording time. That is not a good look for you as the professional. If your client is in a good mood, you're doing an interview, they're talking about something, they're very engaged, they're in a flow, and then you have to stop them because you ran out of recording time or you camera overheated. That is not a good look for you as the professional, and that it's not a situation that I want to be in. So that basically left me with one camera brand and two cameras to shoot from, and that was the S1 and the S1H. Now, after careful deliberations, I did pick up the S1H because I just figured that the tilty flippy screen would be something that I would find very useful, and I have, believe me, also the more video-centric functions. Like, I like having the ability to have a lot on the monitor. I can also do things like have waveform and all those more video-centric codecs, and also the 6K Prores RAW out is something that I really just like put me over the edge and made me spend the extra money. Alright, so let's start off with what I really enjoy with the camera. Now, coming from Canon's 5D series, I've been a Canon 5D shooter for the longest time, and then at work we transitioned into shooting with the Sony A7Rs, which are a lot smaller cameras, and for me with my big Viking mittens, I really enjoy a bigger camera. I've also shot a lot with Hasselblad, and this just reminds me more of that grip, and that also gives the manufacturer a lot more real estate to give you things like a proper top display, a lot of dials that you can customize to your liking, and that is what one of the things that I really like with this camera. There are so many buttons and dials that you can make this totally your own. It reminds me of using like an FS5 or EVA1 or those kinds of cameras, FS7. Okay, so let's have a quick look-see at the I/O. Now, up here we got a microphone in, and it has decent enough preamps that I actually use it for the most part. Coming from the Nikon Z6, it's so nice to have a proper preamp so that I don't have to run my microphones into the Ninja 5 or some other kind of external recorder. This works just fine for most client work, or if you want even better preamps, you can just get the Hot Shoe XLR adapter and you got full-size XLR ports for the S1H. The headphone jack, not much to talk about here. You get a good signal so that you can monitor and you can adjust the volume to your liking on the headphone port. It's all good. But here, one of my favorite ports, of the two favorite ports, the USB-C with power delivery, so that you can run your S1H off of both wall power and your power banks if you find yourself without batteries. Really useful in a pinch. And also I really like that Panasonic provided us with a full-size HDMI port. I don't know how many of those ports I've heard colleagues in the business, like the micro HDMI and the mini HDMI ports, being broken over the years, and this is just such a much sturdier like contact to use. But then there's also this little guy right here, which for me as a photographer, I really like, and it's a big lifesaver, because if you find yourself in the situation that for some reason your like wireless flash sync stops working, it happens, you still have the option to use your good old trusty flash sync cable, the analog way. And this port also double functions as a time code port, so you can, if you find yourself in a multi-cam shoot, you can sync it up with all the other cameras that have time code, and that will save you a lot of time in the editing room when doing a multi-cam shoot. So really good on Panasonic for putting that in that small port. Really like that. Let's have a closer look at the tilty flippy screen that everybody calls it, but it is a tilty flippy screen, so they might be onto something. This is one of the big selling points for me when I chose between the S1 and the S1H. And like, if you want to do your vlogging style, you can do that, and I do YouTube videos, so that might be something that actually is useful for me. But more importantly, if I want to do like a flat lay or just be in like a weird angle that, again, us photographers find ourselves lying in all sorts of weird ways. So if you're doing like a weird angle, maybe you're doing like a flat lay and it's like really tight, you can still see what you are doing and produce sharp pictures. Really important. And now for the most important bit, the bit that you all been waiting for. Image quality. Because that's what we use, like this thing, to produce great images. And here the Panasonic S1H does not disappoint one bit. That 6K ProRes RAW that you can get out of this camera, and the 14 claim stops of dynamics range is almost like nothing short of amazing. I really enjoy the picture that I can get out of this camera, and the stills are also really good. Now, I switched between the Panasonic S1H, the Canon 5D Mark III, and the Sony A7R III and IVs on a daily basis, because on my day job as a commercial photographer, I use the Sony A7Rs and the Canon 5Ds. And I would say that I've always enjoyed Canon's color science more. Don't know why, just do. And I feel that the Panasonic S1H is much closer to the Canon 5Ds than Sony's are. I've always struggled a bit with how the Sonys sort of look out of the box. I get them to where I want them, and they are great cameras, but still I just feel that the Panasonic S1H just gets me there quicker. Okay, so let's talk ProRes RAW, because I think it's a big important part of my S1H workflow, because you get that high resolution, you get that 12-bit RAW. It's an image that me, being a stills photographer, coming from that RAW workflow there, it does help because it's an efficient codecs. Unlike the Canon R5, I think it has almost the same bit rate as regular ProRes, which is incredible on its own. But the fact that with the S1H you have the most cuttability right now with the latest version of Final Cut, that you can do things like change your ISO, you have exposure offsets, and you can even change the color temperature when shooting ProRes RAW. Later, that just gives you that more confidence and more flexibility. If you somehow miss your white balance, you can always do that in post, and that is with a codec that you won't be needing terabytes and terabytes of hard drive space to do it, like you do have to do with the R5 or other RAW formats like the Cinema DNG that I get off the Sigma FP that I'm shooting on right now. And also the S1H internal codecs are just fine. I do a lot of stuff just shooting the S1H handheld, and those codecs hold up a lot better compared to the ProRes RAW than my Sigma FP's internal codecs, which are just plain garbage compares to the fantastic image you get when you shoot RAW on the FP. So for most stuff, you will be just fine with that 400 or even the 200 megabit H.265 codec you get out of the S1H. Now let's talk about some things that I don't particularly like with this camera. And there are things that the 4K 60 crop, I don't really get that. We have a big fan here. Obviously there's some processing power that the S1H for some reason might be lacking, but I've heard rumors that, out there on the interwebs, that this has the same sensor as the Sekor F6, and that can provide a full sensor for 6K 48 frames per second, although be it with a slight vertical crop, but it's not a super 35 crop like we get with the S1H. And coming from the FS5, where we had weird short buffered 4K 120, and I would prefer that. If I got 1 minute, half a minute, 2 minutes of 4K 60 in some kind of buffered mode, I would be just fine. So the other thing that I'm not particularly fond of with the S1H, and that goes for my Sigma FP as well, is the LMOD. And the thing being that right now, this is the best video camera you can get with the LMOD. And if I, did not buy any L-mount lenses except for this one that came with my Sigma FP, I still, even though I sold all my Nikon gear, opted to get Canon EF glass, is because with the EF lens mount, I can go Canon C70, Canon R5, I can adapt it to the C200, C300 Mark IV, C500 Mark II, the Arri Alexa LF, the Sony Venice. All those cameras can accept EF glass, but they can't accept L-mount glass. And also I bought the Canon 24-70 2.8 for less than €1,000, and that is the Mark II version. I would have to spend almost triple the money to get the equivalent Panasonic lens, and like roughly the same money to get the Sigma 24-70. But then I would be stuck with a lot smaller used market if I wanted to switch system again or sell my lenses than I have on the Canon EF side. So, okay, so let's talk about the big one, the elephant in the room, the autofocus of the S1H. Now, I have to give it to Panasonic on the still side, and I am a stills photographer. Remember that I have no complaints there, even with adapted glass. Works just fine, actually works more than fine. It works really good. That being said, on the video side, on the firmware 2.0 that I am on right now with my personal S1H, it's absolutely garbage. And that just gives me that little bit of doubt that should I trade in my S1H for an R5 or an A7S3 where I get eye tracking, object tracking, all those things that I know will give me more shots in the end of the day sharp, because even though I have the tilted nucleus nano, which is a fantastic little tool, and I like to put my camera on a slider and on a gimbal, and every so often I will be just a little too early or a little too late with my focus pull, and the object will be unsharp and the shot will be ruined. It would be so nice to just say, camera, track that object, track that person, and I can concentrate on things like lighting, composition, all the other important parts that make an image, and not have to worry about nailing the focus because I know the camera is doing that job and doing it brilliantly. That is the only real thing that I really miss with the S1H, and I'm a commercial stills photographer. I've shot on manual for a decade, more than a decade. And I've been one of those guys that, oh, you know, autofocus is for amateurs. No, it's not. Not when it comes to video. And like, if you're like doing a commercial shoot and you have a really controlled situation and everything is staged, sure, I like a manual lens as much as the next guy. The focus RAW and just like the tactile feel of working with a manual lens is just so much nicer than having an autofocus lens. But when you have to get a lot more shots in the bag, autofocus like good every day of the week for me. So that is it, you guys, for my thoughts on the S1H from a professional hybrid photographer's perspective. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. Hit that like button, consider subscribing to my channel for more video gear review, photography tips and tricks, as well as some photography philosophy. But that is it, you guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye.